Hey, what's up, guys? You're listening to the It Takes a Village podcast. I'm Ashley, your host. This is where the struggles are real, the callings are heavy, the kids are sticky. We come together because it takes a village, and this is your tribe. Hey guys, what's up? You're listening to the It Takes a Village podcast, episode 62, and today I am talking with Sarah Argenal, the CEO and founder of Working Parent Resource. And Sarah is a woman of many skills. She was working in a prestigious law firm in San Francisco, then transitioned into getting her master's degree in marriage and family therapy and adult development, and then became a certified personal coach, and also added many more certifications after that and many more notches to her belt. So Sarah's passion in life is to help burnout professional moms and dads live more deliberately in all areas of our lives so we can let go of that overwhelm that comes with all these transitions and all these things that we want to do, whether it is adding, several certifications to our belt or making a life transition. Maybe you want to move, maybe you want to change your job, maybe you want to quit your job and start your own business, and helps us enjoy that journey as a working parent versus letting it completely consume us, let it stress us out, let us throw us off balance and throw us off our mom game. All those things. And so I'm really excited to share with you some of the tips that she has for us to handle these transitions in our lives better. So let's get to the episode with Sarah. Hey everybody, I have Sarah Argenal here with me on the podcast today from Working Parent Resource, and I'm super excited to chat with her and have us kind of dig into life transitions today, and that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on, but really just like mom life in general. And so Sarah, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So before we get started, if people haven't came across your name, you've been on a ton of podcasts, Pat Flynn's, which was one of my favorite. But if people haven't heard of you or the Working Parent Resource before, could you share a little about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I started Working Parent Resource a few years ago when I became a new mom. I was a bit of an older mom. I was 33 when I first had my son. So I had kind of established my career. I was in the litigation field. I was a project manager at a law firm, at one of the largest firms in the world. So my days were very busy. And life kind of revolved around my work. But my background is actually in marriage and family therapy and adult development, and I'm a certified coach. I have my mediation certification, and I had a coaching practice years ago where I helped people manage their relationships and create life balance and just sort of manage transitions. Those were kind of my specialty areas. So when I became a new mom, I was completely overwhelmed. Even though I was prepared, I had read all the books. I had talked to all my friends who had kids. My sisters had 7 kids between them before I had my first. So I went into parenthood feeling like, okay, I got this, like I'm good at time management. Mm-hmm. I've read all the books. I kind of know what to expect. And then I still kind of had a meltdown a few months into going back to work and trying to juggle all of the things. So I started Working Parent Resource as just sort of a repository for my favorite resources, the books, the experts, the websites, the podcasts, all of those things that I was coming across that were actually helping me craft a life that worked for me. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the books and things that I was reading out there, it kind of worked for one little piece of my life, but not my whole life as a whole, and I found that was kind of the journey that I was on as a working mom was, how do I, fit all of these pieces into this puzzle that works for me and that doesn't necessarily look like what, my friends on Facebook are doing or on Pinterest or in the media in general. I think everyone kind of has their own journey there. So I started Working Parent Resource, just, here's what's working for me. I had some friends who were asking, what are you doing? How are you doing this? How are you happy? And, eventually I started to get more calm and I started to kind of find my groove. So instead of sending long text messages to my friends, I would just kind of put a blog post up, or I would shoot them a link to my website. So it kind of just became, for ease. And then from there, I started a podcast. I created an online course. Now I work work with moms and dads, both moms and dads who are trying to juggle a career as well as a young family. And I help them overcome burnout, like just kind of that feeling where everything is caving in on you and you don't even know where to begin to start making, changes. So I help people kind of get the lay of the land and then, okay, where are we going to start? What's the first step to overcoming that burnout or to escaping survival mode? So that's what I do now. I do live workshops. I get to interview awesome people on my podcast. So it's very well rounded at this point, but that's kind of the progression that it took.
Yeah. Holy cow. That's a lot. And then as you said, you were doing marriage and family therapy. I'm like, I didn't even know that. So I feel like I need to at the minute you said that, I'm like, I have so many questions. We need you. Let's go deeper than what I originally thought. No.
Yeah, sure.
But what would you say was your biggest and maybe ground shaking life transition for you?
I've had so many.
You're like, let me count them.
I know there's I feel like every few years I have one of these groundbreaking transitions that I have to go through. Becoming a mom was probably the biggest, where I didn't become an entirely different person, but the way I perceived the world, the way I perceived who I was, my marriage, my priorities, my values, so many things changed all at once while I was sleep deprived and while I was trying to keep this human alive, and also be a good mom, teach him kind of the ways of the world. All of that just was such a shift for me. And then learning how to integrate all of the things that were also important to me before I became a mom, and still maintaining my marriage with my husband and still having my friendships and, putting energy into those. There were so many different factors that I kind of had to evaluate and fit together. And so when I became a mom, I'd say that was the biggest transition. But I had definitely had several before that as well.
Yeah. Did you prepare yourself, or do you think you were prepared for that transition going in, or was it after you experienced it, then going into your second child, you're like, okay, I'm going to do this differently? Or how did you navigate that?
I'm like a researcher by trade. I love I ingest information and then kind of figure out how to apply it to my life. So I've just always done that. And when I was pregnant and when I was, becoming a mom myself, I read every book I could get my hands on. I talked to everybody I possibly could. I read all the articles on, all the blogs and everything. And so when I went into it, I felt good. And I also, my job was as a project manager in the litigation field. So I was used to a demanding schedule. I was used to last minute crazy pressure, projects. Yeah.
So this is just another project for you.
Yeah. That's what I thought. I was like, okay, yeah, I've got my life. It's a bit hectic. It's overwhelming, but we'll figure a way to, fit this little baby in to it all. And so that's what I went into parenthood thinking is, okay, I just got to find a way to put this one little piece of the puzzle in and I'll be good. And it was so much different than that. It was like somebody took my puzzle and totally threw it up in the air. And it's like, okay, now start from scratch.
Right.
So I felt prepared going in, and within a few months of going back to work, I'm kind of I was out of that fog of being a brand new mom. Maternity leave was over. And then that's when the real work for me started. Was I had a 3-hour commute on a train every day.
Oh my gosh.
My son was in daycare. My husband also had a 3-hour commute, and we both had very demanding jobs in San Francisco at the time. Everything just totally changed. And there was probably no way for me to anticipate all of the different pressures and, how everything would have changed. So I think, I was as prepared as I could be, but that is to say I was, barely prepared at all. And once I kind of was in it was when the real work began for me.
Yeah. How can so all of us are going to go through transitions. I feel like whether it's you just recently went through a big one where you quit your job at your law firm. That is a huge, I know a lot of moms who are listening can relate to that because they have a long hour job or they have a job that they're just not being fulfilled in anymore and they want to quit. But that is probably, besides becoming a mother, because then we go through all that, the identity changing of ourselves and figuring out who we are as a mother plus a wife plus, a mom boss or whatever. Is, when you change a job and then you have a family to think about, it's not just you and you're making the decision. So how was that taking that big step, that's such a big step.
Yes, it's a huge step, and I'm glad it took me a while to make that step. I was still working at my job. I became a mom in 2013. So now we're in 2018. So, and I just had my second little boy as well. So when I first became a mom, I had my first son. I was working at the law firm, and I loved my job. Like that was one of the things that when I was looking at resources for, okay, how do people do this? Like, I know I'll just go find the book where they tell me how to do this, and I never found the book. And a lot of the books that I did find, everybody was trying it, but they were completely taxed and overwhelmed. And eventually they had a breakdown at the end of the book. And I'm like, and then they quit their job. And I'm like, well, I don't want to take that path.
Right.
So that was kind of the work I started to do, was how can I keep my job and still be happy in my job and be a good mom and be involved and engaged and also be a good wife? Like, why do I have to sacrifice one of these areas over another?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the message out there that we hear is, you're a failure. If you're succeeding in one area, you're a failure in the others. And it seems like a message that we all just sort of accept. And I decided, I'm kind of a rebel. I'm like, no, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to find a way. So that was kind of the work I started doing. I remember I was sitting with my husband. We had a date night. Actually, it was during the day. We had a date, and we had a nice meal, and we had some wine, and then we got in the car, and all of a sudden I just broke down in tears, and he had no idea what was going on. I'm like, I just don't think I can continue doing what we're doing. We had all these plans, and we live near family and friends. We have our life set. Like these were the choices that we made. But now I'm in a place where I need to start making new choices, and I was terrified. I didn't know if he would be on board for that, or if he's like, no, wait, what? Why are you changing the rules of the game? So that was where I finally started just questioning everything I was doing and questioning how I was spending my time and, what was I focusing my attention on and my energy on. And from there, I started scaling back at work a little bit at first, and then it was more and more over time. And I'd say I would think my son was about 2 when I started working Parent Resource. And at the time, we also moved from San Francisco to San Diego. So we made both large shifts in our life as well as small ones. And over time, all of those little steps kind of led to, I had my full-time job, which was still very demanding and still required a lot of me, both during the day and then often at night as well. I had my son, who luckily I didn't have the long commute anymore, so I got to see more of him. But I was also, for about a year after I started working Parent Resource, I was going through fertility treatments and trying to get pregnant with our second little boy. And then I did get pregnant. So for the first couple of years of working Parent Resource, I was juggling a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And then once I had my son, just this past fall, my husband and I, we were having a lot of conversations about what's the best move at this point. And working Parent Resource has gotten very busy, and there's a lot going on with it. There are a lot of people who want help. And it just was the right time for me to finally take the step towards my business versus trying to juggle all of those different things at the same time. But it was important to me while I was juggling those things to feel balanced and to feel fulfilled and happy and not stressed out and manic and frazzled all the time. So even those couple of years where I was juggling all of it, I was finding ways to make sure that, I wasn't sacrificing one area over another. And so those are the kinds of things I work with people today to do.
Yeah. And I feel like that's so many of us that when we go through a transition, it's like we don't, it's like that, those books that you're reading that you say you didn't want to end up like, but that's what happens to us because we have no idea how to handle or like manage when our lives kind of do this ebb and flow, peak and valley, things as it's always going to do because the dynamics of our life are always changing, especially with kids, their ages are changing, their activities are changing, our jobs are changing, us as like, a person is changing. And, but it's like we allow all that stress, all that overwhelm, all the sacrifices, like you mentioned, like we feel the guilt for having to do certain things. Do you have any tips on how we can manage, those transitions better without kind of losing our minds or, having those breakdowns or just letting the changes really like put a rift in our life?
Yeah, there are a few different things. I mean, it's so unique for each person, obviously. Everyone's going to be going through their own journey. They all have everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses and coping skills and all of that. But in general, one of the things that I like to do when I'm working with people in this area is just number one, accept that life is going to be a bit more fluid than it was before you had kids. Because even before I had kids, I was kind of one of those types of people who would master something. And then I'm like, okay, awesome. It's like, it was a well-oiled machine at that point. I felt really good. It was just kind of like the small tweaks and, refining things here and there. And I felt like I was on top of my life. I felt like I was productive and doing things well. And as soon as my son came along, that threw all of that in, out of whack. Kids, like you were saying, kids are just, it comes with the territory that they're always changing. They're always developing. Every time you feel like you've got something down, they change or you change, it all shifts. Yeah. And so it's constant recalibration and adapting to new circumstances. So for me, that was a big shift in just in terms of the transition, was realizing that I was never going to master this. This is not about becoming perfect at what I do. There's no perfection there. It's all more about being as good as you can in each moment and just sort of being deliberate, being conscious about what you're doing in each moment and making the most of the time that you have right now and not worrying so much about trying to do it all perfectly or comparing yourself to other people, kind of just getting in your own world and doing what you can with what you have available right now. And sometimes, everybody has the flu. You've got big projects at work that are due. You're not doing well. Your marriage is on the rocks or whatever. Like there are so many different things that can come up. And so those moments you just kind of have to power through. But other times you can get ahead of it and you can be a little bit more proactive about the things that you're agreeing to do, the things that you're saying yes to, the things that you set your boundaries around. Those are kind of just a few of the small things that you can do that make a big difference. But for me, I just kind of, one is acceptance, just understanding that I'm never going to like get it down, even as soon as I do, it's going to shift. Yeah. And becoming, comfortable with that. Secondly is being in the moment and being conscious, being deliberate about the choices that you make. But then 3 is really understanding your values and understanding what choices you need to make in order to have the life that you want to have. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was hard for me. Like I valued my career, I valued my marriage, I valued all these things. And then my son came along and that shifted all of those priorities for me. So I really had to become self-aware. I had to become very clear within myself about what was most important to me. And that wasn't always the same as what was important to the people around me. And I had to deal with kind of the fallout of that. For example, telling people at work, I'm no longer available in the evenings. Like this may be a deal breaker at this job. It might not. I don't know. And luckily for me, they worked with me around that. Yeah. But there are a lot of different things we can do. But the first thing is, I think, kind of becoming clear about what choices you're going to make, because I feel like so many of us are in such survival mode that we're just reacting to the latest fire, and trying to put that out. And then as soon as that's out, there's another fire, and we can never get ahead of the game. We can never get clear about the choices that we're making, which means we're never going to be in control of our time and our energy.
That's so good. Yeah. And did you and your husband have to go like kind of team up or talk? Because I feel like there's an aspect of like dealing with it personally and like you said, acceptance, and which I think is a huge thing of I could just see how if you don't have that acceptance over the fact that things change and things flow like that, and you're trying to nail it perfectly, obviously we're never going to nail it. And so if we're aiming for that bar, like we're always missing. And so I feel like there's a personal part, but did you and your husband have to kind of team up or talk about how you handle that together? Is that different, or was it the same as how you handled it on your own?
A little bit of both. Number one, yes, we had to start having a lot of conversations, and it kind of started with me kind of having my little breakdown. Right. And that never, we didn't solve any problems that day. It was like, wow, okay, life is different. That was kind of where my denial, like I came out of denial that I could just sort of like plug my new baby into my pre-existing life and that it would all work out. So once I kind of understood and acknowledged, okay, this is different. We're going to have to do something different here. This is not sustainable over the long run. That's where we just started having a lot of conversations. And I'm lucky. My husband is very open and very willing to have those kinds of conversations. I know not everybody either has a partner there to kind of have those kinds of conversations, or their partner is like, nope, this is the way it is, end of discussion, and there's a whole spectrum there. But I was lucky we had a lot of really good conversations about what we wanted our life to look like, where we wanted our finances to be. Because, when we lived in San Francisco, daycare was extremely expensive and we were commuting and the housing was expensive, all those things. So we just started, it was like an archaeology dig. Like we just started uncovering, okay, this is an issue. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out a workable solution. And it wasn't just for me. I had to let go of, here's what I want. And, you be damned. We had to come to agreement in terms of this is what's best both for us as well as for our family. And in some cases, I sacrifice a little bit so that he's a little bit happier. In other cases, he sacrifices so that I'm a little happier. Some cases we both sacrifice so our kids are a bit happier. And, it's that, again, it's also a little bit fluid. Like we kind of take it as each situation comes up. And over the years, we've gotten much better at it. At first, it was a little clunky and a little hard, but the more we kind of opened up to each other and started saying, and very genuinely, like, this isn't just about me. I need to be happier, yes, but I want you to be happy as well. And for us, for example, we moved to San Diego when our son was 2, but for about a year, we were planning to move to Texas, to Austin. And we both got, our agreement from both of our companies to transfer out there. That was sort of the plan. But as we continued to look at it a little bit deeper, it was clear that I was up for it, but it was going to be a very big transition for my husband, who was from the Bay Area. So we just kept talking about it and ultimately came to the conclusion that it wasn't the right fit for him. So it wasn't the right fit for our family. And that was okay. We came up with a different alternative, a different solution that did work for us all. So I think, kind of being willing to have those conversations is the first step, and being willing to look at each person's happiness as well as your own that's what it kind of took for us and what we continue to do to this day. We're kind of constantly having these little conversations now.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And the fact that, as you were saying that, I was thinking about how, like, sometimes we just force things too. Like, I admire that you guys, you especially were just like, as much as you wanted to come to Texas, you were kind of like, okay, maybe it's not just about like what I want. And if you were to push forward with that, then like moving everybody, if your husband's going to be unhappy, it would have been like, maybe it would have affected your family negatively, if he wasn't happy with that as well. So that was really good for me to hear. So how do you think that we can become more mindful in like how we respond emotionally, or like how we're making choices? Because especially for me, I will put myself out there. I will say that I tend to be an emotional decision maker, in that, like, as soon as I feel like I need to do something, or, it affects my emotions, I kind of respond right then and there, which is not great, I will say. But yeah, so how do we, become more mindful in that? Because I feel like there has to be some sort of like awareness to it, or I don't know.
Yes, I totally agree with that. That for me, what has always helped me, no matter what transition I'm going through, but especially these days, is just self-awareness. It's becoming very clear about where I'm at right now, not even like where I was at a year or 5 years ago, but where am I at right now? And that's always evolving. So what I work with a lot of people. I have a lot of different exercises to help people do that. And there are books out there. I mean, that's one of the things, like we have a kind of pop psychology culture out there where there are always quizzes and articles and questionnaires, books, things that can help you get much clearer about what it is you, number one, are striving for. Like, what answering that question has been really helpful for me. Where do I want to go? What do I want my life to look like? What, and not only what do I want it to look like what are the external elements, but how do I want to feel? Like, what do I want my day to feel like? Do I want to feel calm or energized or relaxed or excited or stimulated? What are some of the feelings that come along with what I'm trying to achieve? And then secondly, how can I start trying to achieve that now? What little thing in my day-to-day life can I adjust right now to just move a little bit closer to that vision? So that's kind of an overall answer to it, but that's specifically what I help people do as well. Is I have a couple of different questionnaires that I've crafted just from, my 2 decades of reading books and understanding psychology and understanding time management and understanding productivity and understanding relationships and kind of all the different pieces of our lives as working parents. How do you put all of that together and come up with a couple of answers that you need now? How can you get that clarity now to start making changes in your life now? So those are things that I also offer to people at Working Parent Resource as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And also I was going to ask you, do you utilize the emotions that you feel when you're going through a transition, or is there any sort of like self-talk or something that you kind of tell yourself to help you from not to immediately, responding or letting it overwhelm you?
Yeah, I'm much more of a head person. Like I'm a thinker.
Yeah.
But it's over the years I've learned to cultivate like my intuition as well, because if the two aren't aligned, that's important information for me, because I've done the thing where I'm like, well, this makes complete sense logically. And that was, the example with not moving to Texas. Like there was something nagging at me when we were going through that process. I'm like, this makes so much sense on paper. Why is this not feeling right? There's something wrong here.
Yeah.
And ultimately we got to some of those answers, but kind of marrying the two is what has really helped me. But, those are, I think, because I approach things sort of from more of a thinking view, that's why a lot of the questionnaires, and for me, books have always been really helpful, self-help books and things. Or even just talking to a friend, or just getting very clear about how how you think you want to approach it. Like, I think that if you're an emotional person, you probably are always going to approach it from an emotional point of view, and that's not a bad thing. But then trying to kind of cultivate like, okay, how can I kind of put a safety net in there of thinking through the process as well before I act, before I, follow through on this decision. Because whichever way you're coming at it, it's totally fine, I think, to start from there, but then kind of have the safety net built in on the other side as well.
Yeah.
Before you take action.
Yeah. Like putting Post-it notes all over the place saying, think before you act. No.
Yeah, totally. And that's, again, like I found that this is such a unique experience for people. Everybody is so different. We all are motivated by different things. We're reaching for different things. We have different family dynamics. Everything is so specific to our own life. But there's a lot of advice out there that's kind of blanket advice. So take that sort of stuff with a grain of salt as well. And, work from your strengths, I think, start from there, and then you kind of have to come up with a system to check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's the Post-it note that I'm going to put everywhere.
Check yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And is there, along with this, there's probably, like you said, support that you have to think about. So how would you handle it if you are going through things in motherhood and marriage and life, whatever, and your support either isn't there or they're not supportive? How would you suggest that we find support elsewhere?
I think you can find support for pretty much anything you need at this point. We have social media, we have groups on Facebook, we have local community groups, we have friends, family, relatives, coworkers. Like there are people out there, and you can find people who align with your values or align with your motivations or with your strengths or with your particular area or where you're at in your life. So I think searching for those people that align is what's really key, because I think our tendency is to just talk to the people who are closest to us, our spouse or our family members. And typically those are the people who don't really want you to change, because then, they're going to have to face that change as well.
Yeah.
So they have sort of an unconscious or subconscious need to keep you where you're at because that feels safe for them. So understanding that, and like for me, I know the people in my life who are safe to talk to about certain topics. Some people in my life I can talk to about some topics, but not others. And so just becoming very clear about which person you can go to or which people you can go to talk about certain things and to get advice on certain things, or to reach out to if you're having a rough day or are struggling with a challenge. To me, it's sort of helped to categorize those relationships and not try and find support from the people who aren't really equipped to give it to me in that area. So I think having especially for moms, having kind of a mommy group who are not judgmental and who are supportive of you as a human and like your own path and what you're doing as a parent, and not, aren't going to try and sway you to do what they're doing. That can be one of the most invaluable things we have as parents. And as we go through this transition, is just having that support and the people who get it, the people who are kind of going through it as well. So, no one's really an expert. It's just, you've got that base of support. And then, there are people in my personal life who I'll talk to about a lot of different things, and then I will just not bring up other topics because I know their advice is either so different from what works for me or, what's in alignment with my values that it's not going to be helpful. It's going to make me feel guilty, or it's going to make me question myself or second guess myself. So just kind of setting some of those boundaries and being clear about who is a good support for what in your life. It's okay to divvy it up. You don't just have to have your spouse is the person you go to for everything, or, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that a lot of, like we grew up that way, whether it was shows that we watched or movies that we saw, it was like they either had these, it'd be like, one main female character and she had one best friend that she told everything to, or, and that's just not how, and so when you feel like, you're like, man, I don't have that person. Well, yeah, but you probably have like 5 different people that you share different parts of your life with. And so, and that's okay too. Yeah. But you, like that was such a good reminder. I remember when I recently started, I think it was like about July. I don't know. That's more than 3 months ago maybe, but I'm not good at math either, guys. Me neither. So around July, I started taking care of my mom, and I really didn't know anybody. Like I'm about to turn 30, so I have like no friends who are doing that right now. I just happened to have a older mother, and so it was just time to do that for her, and I didn't know anybody. So I was like, okay, well, I have Facebook, and I know there's a bajillion groups on here. Maybe I could find a Facebook group of something to do with what I'm going through. And sure enough, like I found one specific to my area. So it was like DFW caregiving, group for family members or whatever. And I like absolutely knew nobody in there, but it was a place to where like I knew they had done it. A lot of people, even though they weren't the same age as me, they had been there, done it, and I could post in there and ask for their advice and get questions answered, because that was like a whole new can of worms that I didn't even know like what I was doing. And so I think that utilizing, like you said, it doesn't have to be like people we know or but like Facebook groups. So if you guys are going through something, you could search on there, and there's literally a group for everything.
Anything you want. And local ones now too, with meetup.com. I mean, there are so many, there are just so many different communities out there. So yeah, I think if you do a little bit of searching, you'll probably find one that can help you with whatever you're going through. Yeah. And like you said, you might need a few different ones to cover your whole life. It might not be the one group that is going to help you through it all. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah. What has been your biggest takeaway, like having gone through so many transitions so far, big and small? What do you think, looking back, is like your biggest takeaway, realization, or something like that you gained from those experiences?
I think for me, it's kind of like stay in your own lane. I spent so much of my life, so many years helping other people. I'm kind of in the therapy, self-help type field, psychology, all of that. And so my tendency is always, let me help you fix yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I not only attracted a lot of people who needed that kind of help, but I also took it upon myself to fix all of those people. And obviously it doesn't work.
Yes. No.
And so once I kind of shifted my focus into myself and started to improve myself and get to know myself and accept myself and love myself and understand myself, all of those things have been the thing that made me happy in my life. I was never happy when I was trying to get all these other people around me to change. And now, as not only an adult, somebody who's living my life, but especially as a mom, I see how easy it is to compare ourselves to other people and to take on the expectations of others and all of those things.
Yep.
And I think as a mom specifically, like it's been really helpful to say, okay, like these are options. These are things I can choose if it fits for me based on what I know about myself. So the more clarity I can come to around who I am and how I'm living my life as a mom and as a wife and as a, just a person, what works for me, and take what I want and let the rest go. Let the other people do that if that's what works for them, but kind of let go of those external expectations and all of the pressure that comes along with that, and just live my life, live the life that's going to work for me, and kind of let go of the judgment and the, what's going on out there.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I think there's so much power in like the way that we talk to ourselves, and I haven't, perfected that at all by any means. I'm trying to, but like just hearing you say, just changing the wording from like, you don't like have to I choose to, or I'm going to choose to do the, then it sounds more like you have control over it, and you don't have to do it all. Like you don't feel obligated.
Well, we can't. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest, the things I see out there right now is that we kind of all feel like we're doomed to live in these crazy lives, or not always measuring up, or our reality is not ours to change. And I don't believe that. I think that we absolutely can change our reality, and we can absolutely take control of our lives and make choices. And not only can we, but we should. That's what's going to not only make us happy and kind of make this whole experience much more fulfilling, but also this is what our kids see, so it empowers them to do the same sorts of things as they're growing older. It gives us that strength to show them how to do it and model it for them.
Yeah. And much better than us like shutting ourselves off in the closet every time we have to deal with like a transition, like gaining 20 pounds and shutting ourselves in the closet and, eating all the chocolate because
there's a time for that. I think.
Yes. Oh yeah.
There's a moment when you sort of just need to be like, oh my gosh, I got some work to do, but not today.
For sure. So before I ask you a few last questions that I have for you, where can everybody go if they feel like, hey, like I need some help in these areas? I want to check out Sarah's resources. I want to see what she's talking about because this really resonates with me. Where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm at workingparentresource.com, and I have all sorts of different free resources there. We're right now doing, it's a year-long challenge, actually. It's kind of a series of monthly challenges where we're focusing on a different area of our life every month. That's called the Deliberate Life Challenge that people can sign up for and participate in if they want. We have the podcast. We have other guides and blog posts and just other resources there for people. And then I also what I do mostly with people is something called the Burnout Rescue Plan, where it's sort of a package where people can get clarity on not only what's overwhelming them, but what first steps to take to begin to get out of that overwhelm, to get out of that survival mode. So people can take a look at all of that at workingparentresource.com. It's all there.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get to my last few questions. If you could choose one of the most influential books that you've read, what would it be?
I think one of the ones that really kind of changed my tack in life is one called Codependent No More by Melanie Beattie. And I don't know that it's like the most prolific book in the world, but for me, it made such a difference because that was, like I was mentioning, I was so concerned with what everybody out there was doing. And that was one of the books that allowed me to not only start focusing more on myself and on what I was doing with my life, but it allowed me to stop feeling like I needed to please everybody else, or to even have a stake in what everyone else outside of me was doing. So that's one of the ones that had just a really big impact on my life.
Yeah, we need to stop comparing ourselves, y'all. I feel like that's one of our biggest struggles, especially with like Instagram and all these things. It's like we just feel like our lives don't fit into those square little boxes anymore, and that's just not so. Like everybody has their messes, and I love that quote. What is it like? Some people are just better at hiding it. Like we all have our messes. Some people are just better at hiding it. But
yeah, exactly. We're all kind of living our own journey, and I think these days it's a lot easier to focus on what everyone else is doing because it's like right there in front of us all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to shut a lot of that noise out and get real clear on ourselves. So those are some of the things that I have had to do in my life, and it's made a big difference.
Yeah. If you could tell your younger self one thing, assuming that she would listen, what would it be?
So same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Get clear on who you are and live from that place. Be very deliberate about the choices that you make and about who you're letting into your life, what you're focusing your attention on. All of those things are what, I think everybody's out there trying to find happiness and to find fulfillment and, contentment. And I feel like that's where it really comes from, is living your life your way and letting go of what everybody else thinks it should be.
Yeah. I feel like that should be a Nike commercial. Live your life your way.
I'll put a quote somewhere.
Yeah. Could be like your your tagline.
Tagline.
Yeah.
I know. If my tagline changes like every other week.
I know, but
we'll add that one in there.
Yeah. What is your favorite form of self-care?
For me, it's setting boundaries. You can do your nails, you can do all these things, but for me, saying no to things that aren't, at the top of my priority list is one of the ways that I keep a lot of white space in my schedule, and that gives me a lot of energy. I'm one of these people that's an introvert. I need a lot of time to myself to recharge, or just, with my family, downtime. So if I have a real packed schedule, it's tough for me. And if I have a ton of people who are expecting a lot of things from me, it starts to really wear on me pretty quickly. So I've gotten very clear about the things that I want to commit to. And when I commit to something, I'm excited to do it. Or at least I feel like it's an important thing to commit to. And then everything else, I have gotten much better at saying, no, thank you. Like, this isn't a good time for me right now. This isn't, I don't have the bandwidth for this. So that's been one of the things. I'm not a stressed out, crazy mom. I have had to figure out how to live my life in a way that is fun for me. And I've been able to do that. And one of the first things that I've had to do is to say no and to set boundaries and enforce those.
That's so good. I love asking that question because I feel like we're still stuck on the idea that self-care is something like getting our nails done or going to the spa or something. And so we just don't do it, and then we don't acknowledge that there's other things that we need to take care of ourselves, like that, like having or setting boundaries. And that's so freaking huge, to be able to say no, like to not overwhelm, like fill your cup up too full to where you're just like drowning in all the things.
Yes. Yeah. And it's kind of like the domino that'll knock all the other ones over.
Yeah.
It's like if you're saying no and you're reserving time in your life for yourself or your family or whatever, then you can go get your nails done, or you can go to the spa, or you can go out to lunch with a girlfriend or whatever. And so it makes space for all of the other stuff. But for me, when I was not saying no, when I kind of let everybody else dictate what I was doing with my time, that's when I felt really overwhelmed and out of control. And like I wasn't the one living my life. It was somebody else kind of dictating all of that.
Yeah. If you could empower women in one way, what would it be?
I think, again, there's this message out there that life has to be this struggle, that it has to be this frantic, frazzled, crazy experience. And, eventually someday maybe we'll pull it together and become happy. And I want to empower moms especially, but just parents, people. Like, it doesn't have to be a struggle. It can be fun and it can be rewarding. Now, it can be thrilling to be a working parent, to be, just to be a parent, to be just living our life. And we don't need to live in this survival mode that I think so many people out there are. We don't have to be sort of controlled by what's going on out there. We can kind of decide what we want our life to look like and start creating that for ourselves now.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the It Takes a Village podcast. I am truly grateful that you are a listener and that you chose this podcast to listen to on your walk, while you're doing the laundry, while you're working out, maybe while you're boss momming on the side. I really appreciate you, and I hope that you tune in next time. Bye.